I'll talk about our work at Dalberg and how it links to shared value and use that to generate some examples. But it's important to really start at the beginning and to ground ourselves again in, I think, some of the reasons why we're here. There are 17 sustainable development goals, and it's very easy in the world of business, where we do a lot of our work, for people to glaze over and say, it's 17 and 169 targets, I cannot be bothered, and so on. But it's actually three very simple statements. We are breaking down what it takes to create a more equitable world in which all people have the opportunity to earn a decent living, a more sustainable world in which our ecology is not on a collision course with our ongoing survival as a species, and a more inclusive world in which it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, your gender, who you worship, who you love. You take those three things and you break them down, and quickly enough, you'll come up with the 17 goals, 169 targets. You heard already from Fatu, and I think it is important to recognize that originally these types of goals were set with an eye to government, the development sector. The reality, though, is you cannot achieve social change at the scale that we envisage with these goals, or address the scale of challenges we're facing today in terms of inequality, ecological collapse, and real tensions around inclusion, unless you bring the third key component of society. So the public sector can provide a voice and has a shared legitimacy. The social sector can really focus on the needs of the most vulnerable, understanding them, engaging in innovative philanthropy, testing out ideas. But the vast majority of us live and work in the private sector. And if it is not at the core of achieving these goals, we're basically saying all of the things that we care about as human beings, we will leave to two sectors on the sidelines, while the rest of us focus on something that if any of us were pressed, would acknowledge is not the be-all and end-all, which is just making money. If any of your children came home and said, Mommy, Daddy, I have decided that all I want to do is be rich, what would you say? So that's the reason why we need to be trisectoral athletes in the pursuit of the SDGs. We need to work across the public, the private, and the social sector in harmony and in coordination. Now, as business leaders, though, what does that mean? And again, the law of threes. We really need to think about the three avenues in which we operate. One is each business has a supply chain. Are we engaging those who supply us in the right way? And there's a lot of ideas there. More centrally, each business has employees. It is composed of employees, each of whom is a fully realized human being, each of whom is critical to the success of a business. And finally, each business, in order to exist, has clients and customers. And as you think about shared value, there are opportunities. As you think about shared value, or whatever other framing you want to use to think about how you're contributing to a more equitable, sustainable, and inclusive world, it is important to seek opportunities in each of those areas. Now, the pros did a good job of highlighting just how big some of our deficits are. But it is important to also think about it in terms of the untapped opportunity. The spaces where there isn't a tension between the pursuit of profit and long-term growth in a business and actually addressing issues. I'll be very concrete. Let us start with the area of who a business employs. Right? Very often, we as business leaders are tempted to say, when faced with new taxation, new regulation, new challenges to do more in society, we're tempted to say, and quite correctly, we are job creators, which is correct, which is true. But are we being deliberate about who we employ, how we employ, where we employ, in ways that maximize that positive impact? If we're going to hold that up as our positive impact, are we doing enough to earn that cover, if you will? And there's examples of how you can do so. Right here in South Africa, you've seen a number of businesses come together to actually say, how do we bring underprivileged youth into the workforce at scale, bridge them in, right? There's the work that individual companies are doing. There's the work of platforms, shared platforms like Harambee, that are now touching hundreds of thousands of young people, have tens of thousands of young people now being placed in work. That doesn't come from a very surface look at saying, well, we are just employers. You need to then be deliberate about saying, who are we employing? How do we increase the number of people with a stake in the economy? How do we address the barriers that exist to hiring? The beauty of these types of collaborations targeted at addressing the needs of the community is it produces workers who are readier to start work, less likely to leave, more committed to growing the business, and also our consumers. Another aspect of thinking about who you employ is around diversity. And here I'll pick an example from elsewhere. One mind-boggling number for me, the first time I saw it, I did not believe it, but in a piece of work we did together with Intel, we estimated that in the technology industry alone, there's $500 billion of lost value from a lack of diversity. It turns out that having an industry that is heavily dominated by people who look the same, are of the same gender, more or less come from the 3 or 4 same places, limits that industry's ability to design products and services that resonate with everyone else. And yet the question is never asked, is there some reason why only certain people can code? Is there some reason why only people from a certain part of the world can develop products? The irony of that is, of course, we talk about the Silicon, I'm from Kenya, so we talk about the Silicon Savannah and the rise of startups in East Africa. But even there, we're seeing a reality. A lot of those businesses are struggling to get to scale. And very often, all you need to do to understand that is look at who are the people getting funder investment. 90%, or close to 90%, of businesses getting early stage funding in the technology space in East Africa have expatriate founders. Right? And then you wonder, well, why aren't these apps resonating with the people that they're meant to serve? So let's park staff, and what you'll hear is critiques and opportunities kind of blended together. But I'll go around the circle, and we can maybe reflect in questions. If we think about products, right? A lot of what exclusion means is a lack of access to products designed for you. An obvious space for that is, finance, right? Financial inclusion. By very definition, we're turning to our financial institutions and saying, serve more people. And if you're successful in doing that, well, you will sell more of your product, which is financial services. The challenge is, how do we ground ourselves adequately in what those people and those opportunities look like, right? And that ties back to who actually works in these institutions. So do we have a real understanding of the needs of our market and how to engage with them? And in a range of exercises, we've found that efforts to increase financial inclusion often founder on that failure, one, to really understand the community, and two, to partner with other actors in the public and social sector who are trying to accomplish the same aims. Bring those into alignment, and you can often unlock tremendous value. Examples of organizations that have used partnerships between public and social sector to actually underwrite the rolling out of key pieces of financial services infrastructure. And then you use that to access your client. Another example of that is in the area of connectivity. I think one example I'm particularly proud of is an initiative called DigiFarm, in which a large global NGO, Mercy Corps, worked together with one of the leading network operators in East Africa, and with us to develop a product that within months of launch was delivering information, market linkages, a whole range of partnerships to 800,000 farmers. Now, it was interesting that the mobile network operator did not engage through a CSR angle. They were saying, these are 800,000 users of our data services. And if we can work with a social sector actor who's engaging with the smallholder farmer to really understand what they need, we will create greater stickiness for our product. So again, rapid scale that would not have been possible purely at the social sector level is attained by making that magical partnership happen between the public and the social sector. And then finally, the supply chain. And here I'll just make a point. Very often businesses check the box. I am trying to be inclusive in my supply chain because I'm sourcing from a particular area. Or alternatively, I am engaged in fair trade. I'm paying as much as I can to the smallholder farmers who are growing what I'm trying to develop. Very rarely do we take a broader systems view to ask if we really want to change the economic trajectory of the suppliers we work with, which you have to if you're working in Africa. What do we need to do? And the reality there is you paying them enough or paying them more is not going to be enough. Because guess what? You're a business. You're trying to control the costs of your inputs. And if they only supply you, then at some level, they're in conflict with you. So how do you think systemically about making them more competitive, broadening who they're engaging with, increasing the range of options available to them? Right? And that very often runs aground in the idea that one business cannot boost the actors in its supply chain without engaging with other large businesses. Right? Very often the reality is a mining company cannot beneficiate the area, the small businesses that will supply its mine without engaging with agribusiness companies, without engaging with large banks, without engaging with logistics companies. And so shared value cannot be a function of just one institution saying, well, we want to take a shared value approach. It has to be a range of businesses each asking, can we both generate shareholder value while actually being deliberate about how we unlock value for the community? In one case, actually one of the sponsors here, they're asking the question, we are very active with agro-suppliers. How do we make them globally competitive through a series of smart investments in particular capabilities that they may have? Let's find out what it would take for others other than ourselves in our industry to source from this area. And let's begin to build the capabilities that this area will need to have in order to get there. So it's possible, whether you're thinking about your supply chain, your employees, or your customers, to really be, not be stuck looking for opportunities, but indeed be befuddled by just how many opportunities are out there. And now the question is, how do you choose and how do you focus? So the opportunity exists. And I think the good news, and in some ways it gives me hope amidst the various deficits that we hear about, the good news is we're also seeing a generational shift. Right? Certainly for us, as we go out there in the world of talent, we're finding a generation that simply refuses to come to employers that will not allow them to bring their whole selves to work. That will demand that in the process of pursuing profit, they ignore the fact that they've been raised to think that money isn't everything. You have to think about other aspects of what you're trying to accomplish. I think a really good example of this is an event that we've been involved with since last year called Unleash. We convened 1,000 social entrepreneurs from 129 countries, a large number of them actually from Africa. Africa was overrepresented. These were some of the most cutting-edge entrepreneurs in the world, and all of them were saying what we want to focus on is entrepreneurial opportunities in the SDGs. We want to build businesses that will scale, that will do well, will change the world, but we want to be aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. I was convinced, the first one was in Denmark, I was convinced there's no way we can find, these were the 1,000 that were interested. Next week, another 1,000 are gathering in Singapore. And they're attracting venture capital and investment. So the future champions are going to have shared value at their core, at their founding. The question is, can the incumbents remodify themselves and follow suit before the trend runs away from them? So with that, again, if there are a couple of takeaways I would offer, it is one, recognize that without shared value, we will not attain these goals. And if you don't want to think about the goals, just think about the fact that we're heading for some major crises around social inclusion, around sustainability, around inequality. Secondly, it's all about thinking about the broader ecosystem in which a business operates. Thirdly, partnerships across the public, private, and social sector are key to getting real scale. And finally, the next generation is going to do it, so the only question is, will they sweep you away or carry you along? Thank you.